what's up, y'all? This is Claire Dunn, and you're listening to TNCRadio.Live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to TNCRadio.Live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.Live, where we offer the weather, traffic, news, sports, and entertainment and information our commercial drivers want. Information is one thing we really like to provide our drivers, and the supply chain is in the news just about every day now. No one knows more about its fluctuations than our commercial drivers. Despite a slight rebound from the chaos created from the pandemic, world events are raising havoc. We decided to consult with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of the LMA Consulting Group, to learn more about what's exactly going on. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for being back on the show with us today.
Glad to be here.
I thought before we got into the nitty-gritty of what's happening in the supply chain, we could learn more about you. What do you do exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am a supply chain management expert, which means that I work with manufacturers and distributors typically and help them improve their service levels to their customers and their profitability and also their cash flow all at the same time.
Awesome. You know, I don't think I've seen anything more chaotic and uncertain than what's happened to the supply chain in the past couple of years. It seems like there's a rotten apple out there. Nobody can find it. And it's starting to impact everything from gas to diesel to our food chain, our electronics, the automotive industry. Oh, my goodness. It's a huge logarithm, and it's so very worrisome. What's happening? Do you see an end in sight? I think everyone's kind of confused.
Yeah, I wish I could say I see an end in sight. So what's happening is that during the pandemic, our supply chain got out of alignment. So if you think about it like a teeter-totter or something like that, all of the product and equipment is in the wrong places at the wrong time. And it's because we're global and it's vast, and there's a lot of players that are owned by different parties. It's just highly problematic to realign itself. And there's continued disruption. So beyond the pandemic, there was, like, for example, the Texas storms last year. There was the Suez Canal issue. There is labor shortages. Now there's the Russia-Ukraine war. And there's people who are reconfiguring their supply chain. So it's in a constant state of flux. And it's, from a global point of view, it's definitely still out of alignment, especially since China now is like shut down, and it's been shut down for several weeks. So we now are going to be ready and waiting here for a new tsunami of causing further misalignment in our global supply chain. So in essence, unfortunately, there is no picture as far as it getting aligned from a global perspective. However, to leave you with no hope, with a little bit of hope here, is that individual companies are able to take control and figure out how to align. But as far as like the global supply chain and all the different partners, it's quite the challenge.
Oh, yeah. And we're so connected globally. Do you think that exacerbates a lot of this? I mean, obviously, we depend on China for a lot of things because we have manufacturers over there. And Ukraine has all of the resources that we need. And now there's even some uncertainty people keep talking about with Taiwan, if there's an issue there.
No doubt about it.
How do companies
for sure.
plan? Yeah, I mean, I would think this would be a nightmare for manufacturers. How do they plan?
Well, it is highly problematic. So what I'm seeing is that we'll call them smarter, but the more proactive, innovative, resilient manufacturers are thriving. Their volume is continuing to increase. And I think what's happening and is going to continue to happen is they will continue to take business from those who are status quo. Like they're not resilient, innovative, looking forward, proactive, and addressing all these issues. So that alone will further exacerbate the supply chain because, like whoever they're taking business from, if you will, their supply chain is by no means located in the same places or configured the same. So things will continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. But yes, to your first question, we are connected, and we're truly as strong as our weakest link, which has been a saying. It was a saying before the pandemic, and now it's become a reality.
Oh, absolutely.
Whoever is the weakest link which moves. It's not always the same weakest link.
With all the long-term studies and so forth that even government does, they do a lot of them. How did they not see this coming? And why hasn't somebody taught them efficiency to stem the tide in all of this?
Oh, my goodness. What a question. Well, I would say that I think the issue, because I participate in some groups that coordinate across industry partners, governmental entities, and educational institutions. And what I can say from participating with those groups is that there are so many different players that have different objectives. Like they each have their different profit or, profit objectives, or like in the government's situation, it would be more, different, like they have to serve their people, budgets, etc. But they each have conflicting objectives. There are countless partners in the supply chain, not even all in the same country, right? So we're global. So they're not even, there's coordination across countries, across governments. There's across companies. Even two companies may not be incented to achieve the same results because one might gain money and the other one might lose money. And that's unacceptable as a board member of the company that loses money.
Sure. This is such a wide-ranging problem. Where do we find the source of the problem? How do we solve this so it doesn't get worse? Is there any way to do that? Just thinking about it, it's just overwhelming.
Well, so I guess we can address that question in two ways. One is, what do we do as a country, I guess you could say, because that's at least something that's certainly not within our control on this call, but it's at least within our country's control. Yes. And then we can talk about our company or our like the supply chain that we're a part of anyway. That's far easier to control, but it's not easy. So I guess from a country perspective, really what has to happen is that when the pandemic started, there was a program called Operation Warp Speed, which you're probably aware of, that helped to get the vaccines created in, a really short period of time versus anyone thought was possible. And then also the logistics side of this equation. So how to not only develop a vaccine, but how to get that vaccine, how to manufacture it, because that was actually a big issue, because you had to have the right raw materials coming far in advance of vaccine approvals, or you wouldn't be able to do it. And then you had to deliver the vaccines to wherever they needed to go, which could be hospitals and pharmacies and just to there was that was a significant issue. So I would say something like an Operation Warp Speed that combined industry with government, with given the right priorities, minimizing the regulatory bottlenecks without creating issues, obviously. Right. The same kind of a principle is what I think would be the only hope to getting a handle on the global supply chain and what to do, at least from a U.S. or North America perspective. from a company perspective, you don't have to do quite so grandiose a project, but it is still quite problematic, because in essence, what you need to do is wherever you are in the supply chain, because we're all a part of it. And, you know, we're on a call related to trucking, and that's certainly one of the partners. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to, in essence, get in touch with the people who are in your supply chain, you know, not only like, let's say of manufacturing, since like I work with a lot of manufacturers. So we would need to get in touch with our trucking partners, our, you know, if we have outside warehousing partners, manufacturing partners, if we have them, suppliers, our suppliers, so the people who supply our suppliers, and so on. And in essence, you can't do that in detail, but you'd look at it from a what's impacting the current situation, and how do we get our supply chain back into alignment first off, and then how do we make sure that we can grow together or be successful together? So, you know, that's more achievable than every player.
Well, certainly alignment is a good word. When you think about it, the supply chain right now, it's kind of like a car that the frame is severely bent. You wouldn't want to ride in it. I mean, it's gonna
right.
It's not going to go well down the road at all. It's not headed in the right direction. There's so much to unpack here. We do have to go to break. You're listening to the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.Live. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group. Stay tuned for more coming up.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Truckers Against Trafficking can help fight modern-day slavery. Human trafficking is a real and frightening issue in the United States. It's a crime that forcefully exploits women, men, and children. Human trafficking involves transporting a person into a situation of exploitation, which can include forced labor, marriage, or prostitution. The term exploitation in this sense is commonly referred to as modern slavery. At this time, it's estimated that there are 20 to 40 million human trafficking victims internationally. According to the ACLU, the United States Department of State estimates that 14 to 17,000 people are trafficked into the United States each year. Truckers Against Trafficking exists to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking, bus, and energy industries to combat human trafficking. Truckers Against Trafficking goals: saturate trucking and related industries with TAT materials. Partner with law enforcement and government agencies to facilitate the investigation of human trafficking. Marshal the resources of partners to combat this crime. The Truckers Network proudly sponsors Truckers Against Trafficking and their efforts to fight against this heinous crime that's affecting hundreds of thousands of Americans each year. How truckers can help. Training video. Watch Truckers Against Trafficking's free training video and take the short quiz through their online portal. This will register you as an official TAT-trained, TAT-certified driver. Know the red flags. Download the Truckers Against Trafficking app and request a wallet card and window decal at tat.truckers@gmail.com. Share Truckers Against Trafficking's training with others in person and through social media. How trucking companies, schools can help. Training video. Share Truckers Against Trafficking's free training video with your drivers. Request a digital file of your video or physical DVD from tat.truckers@gmail.com. Know the red flags. Tell your drivers to download the Truckers Against Trafficking app and or request wallet cards for your drivers from tat.truckers@gmail.com. Register your company as trained to reflect your impact in the fight against trafficking and encourage others to do the same. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
The Hotshot Secret Facebook page gets a lot of robust Q&A about diesel problems and their solutions. We listen to our customers. Here are their words straight from their mouths about Hotshot Secret everyday diesel treatment. Our fans call it EDT.
I'm John Sharp, a.k.a. Jay Sharp from Newburgh, Pennsylvania. Use an EDT. My my local fuel mileage went to average of 22 to 23, and my highway MPG went to 26 to 28.
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm from Arizona. I drive a 02 Ford Excursion. I use EDT at every fill up, and my mileage went from 12.5 miles per gallon to 14 miles per gallon. I highly recommend it.
Everyday Diesel Treatment delivers a 6-in-1 premium fuel treatment for every fill up, every time.
Everyday Diesel Treatment is available at truck stops, Tractor Supply, O'Reilly's Auto Parts, and online at HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live with Shelley Johnson and Tom Kelly. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group, about the supply chain situation. We also have our driver partner, Tom Kirk, with us, who has some questions for Lisa from a driver perspective. Tom, I think I'll throw it to you because you said you have quite a few questions for Lisa.
It's almost a question of where to start, but I think maybe a good place to start, Lisa, is something that drivers have noticed and often comment on. It seems like certain customers that we used to haul for that used to make things in the U.S. are, moved a lot of their production overseas. But in some cases, it maybe wasn't because they wanted to. It was because major retailers or other customers that they were dealing with more or less said, hey, each year we want you to make this product for us. And by the way, you need to make it cheaper each year, even though costs and other things are going up. And if you can't do it, at your local plants here in the U.S., we've got suggestions for plants overseas. You can use here's their card. Do you think some of that has played a role in some of these problems and difficulties? And if so, to what level do you think that could be playing a role?
Yes, absolutely. It certainly could. Because anytime you expand your supply chain and you add significant lead time and complexity, different countries and et cetera, into the supply chain, then everything is fine when everything is working well. And, things were working well for several years. So the risks really didn't show up. I've worked with clients that have, departments, or they have customers that show up and say, let's do a readiness assessment or a risk assessment. And they go through the motions, but they're really assuming that, nothing significant happens. And so the problem is any risk or disruption that occurs throughout the world can impact you to a much greater degree when you've gone global with your supply chain. And that's what's happened. So for sure, it definitely has had an impact. I mean, how many of those customers outsourced for that reason versus they were thinking in terms of labor cost of themselves is a question. With that said, though, what I've noticed is that a lot of people will admit to it that they outsourced because of labor costs, when labor cost is just one piece of the total cost of getting product from, let's say, Asia to the U.S. So there's many, many costs: IP costs, inventory costs, container costs, and you're in charge of or in control over less of them, right? When you have all these partners involved, so they continue to go up. So they may start smaller, but they'll continue to go up when you have less control over doing anything to make them better. Whereas if you are producing locally or closer to your customers, and you're if you're producing it on your own, or if you have a strong partnership with a local or regional supply, then you have more control over, and you can better manage those cost changes. So I'm definitely seeing an uptick in folks looking at reshoring and nearshoring. So moving production back closer to home, if you will, but really it's closer to customers. So you can respond more quickly to changing conditions. And like you said, actually more inexpensively as well.
Would it help to be more independent? I know that there are a lot of people saying we're way too dependent on outside countries outside our borders. Maybe we should have some way to stockpile so we have some sort of a buffer. we are so dependent too on-time delivery. It seems like we kind of cut off our nose to spite our face, didn't we?
Well, yes, exactly. Another thing we're doing is that we were expecting things to continue, as I said, like sort of on the level that it was continuing on at the time without disruptions. But if nothing else, we found not just from the pandemic, but I mentioned some of the other disruptions that have occurred. Mm-hmm. We can't control everything. We can't control weather events. And so that they're just happening. So if you aren't able to control your supply chain, you have two repercussions. One is that you cannot be responsive to changing customer conditions, and you can't be responsive to changing supply conditions, both of which are happening currently. And so that results in poor on-time delivery. And it also can result in higher costs, which we're seeing because we're certainly not in charge, for example, of container costs, and they've gone up by 4 times since the pandemic started. That's significant. And so, it's basically folks are realizing that they need to bring production to be more of a regional, more regional to customers so they can minimize their risk and they can support changing conditions. Because if there's one thing that's going to be true is that things are going to continue to change and evolve over the next several years. It's going to be very volatile.
That makes it really tough to plan. Tom, did you have any other questions?
I think Lisa just touched on it, but I'd like to go back on it a little bit further to make sure I heard you correctly, Lisa. It also seems like maybe from a trucking perspective that certain products have gotten sourced to, let's say, one specific country or region or a large portion of the manufacturing of them, so that if the supply chain gets disrupted, instead of being a small blip, it's now more of a Grand Canyon, for lack of a better term, instead of a pothole. Right. I guess, how do you see this changing and maybe how trucking could fit into that?
Well, I definitely think things are going to continue to change, especially and definitely trucking is going to fit into that because, really, you are absolutely essential in the supply chain because, one, you're delivering to customers, and so you're the last relationship, if you will, to the customer, and it's the timely, like you said, we're all about on time and full OTIF, on time delivery. There's especially the bigger retailers like you're mentioning. And there's a lot of inflationary pressures currently going on. And there's pricing pressures, like you said, on the other side of the equation. So I think that people are going to executives, are going to start to reevaluate what they're doing. So that might mean they're going to be moving production. They're going to say, you know what, why am I struggling to find people to run a production line or staff a warehouse or whatever, in order to lose money or come out the same, as far as, what key customers are willing to, pay in terms of prices. So they're reevaluating things and saying, you know what, I'm only going to work with certain customers. I'm going to increase prices in these certain categories, or I'm going to focus efforts here or there. So all of those decisions are going to continue to impact the supply chain and change the supply chain, because it could mean that the volume changes to someone else, or it could mean that they go by a different mode of transportation. It could mean that they're going to produce more in the U.S. and then transport it, from a manufacturing facility in the U.S. to the customers, which is very much happening. They're also moving to Mexico. So the Mexico to U.S. routes are also going to become big. Mm-hmm. But I would say from a trucking standpoint, things are going to continually evolve as the supply chains evolve. So there'll be more, if anything, in terms of the need for transportation and trucking in the U.S., because if you have more manufacturers, and then therefore more suppliers in the U.S. and in Mexico that are moving products back and forth and then to customers, you're going to have an increased need for transportation there. Of course, coming from the ports is not going to reduce like anytime soon, because currently there is like a stockpile of containers in China because they're shut down. So they'll all come over here, and we'll have that issue. But and you don't change these things in a day. But definitely, there's a lot of opportunity.
This would be good if it creates more jobs for drivers and owner-operators and small trucking companies. That's a good thing. And maybe we'll move more jobs over here for manufacturing from China, at least for our real essential goods and everything, because I think there's been a lot of worry on that. We have some more things I want to unpack here, but we have to go to break. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group. Stay tuned for more great information coming up.
This blog on TNCRadio.Live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Inspections for truck drivers. Getting stopped for an inspection in the middle of a delivery is a situation every truck driver dreads. Inspections are time-consuming and interfere with the driver's schedule for delivering their load on time. However, they are essential for regulating safety conditions for everyone on the road. There's 6 different levels of DOT roadside inspections. Each level has a unique set of requirements and can happen at any time. It's important to be familiar with all 6 levels of DOT inspections, so if you have one, you can pass. Level 1, North American Standard Inspection. The Level 1 inspection is often referred to as a full inspection and is the most thorough. There are 37 steps to a Level 1 inspection. During this inspection, the driver's credentials and the vehicle will be examined. Because the Level 1 inspection has so many steps, it does take a significant amount of time. A good way to help speed up the process of a Level 1 inspection is by staying on top of driving requirements and proper truck maintenance. Here's some things the inspector will check during a Level 1 inspection. Medical examiner certificate, alcohol and drug use, daily logs, hours of service, HOS documentation, seat belt use, driver and vehicle inspection reports, brake system, chopping devices, exhaust system, truck frame, fuel system, turn signals, brake lamps, tail lamps, headlamps, lamps on projecting loads, safe loading, steering mechanism, suspension, tires, van and open-top trailer bodies, wheels and rims, windshield wipers, hazardous material, HM requirements. If you're a hazard hauler, have your shipping papers ready. Level 2. Walk-around driver vehicle inspection. Level 2 inspections are a less invasive process and are also the most common. They're similar to the Level 1 inspections, except there is less involvement in the vehicle inspection part. During the Level 2 inspection, the examiner will do a walk-around driver vehicle inspection. They'll check everything that's in a Level 1, but will not physically get under the vehicle. Level 3. Driver-only inspection. The Level 3 inspections are the second most common type of inspection. Since the inspection doesn't include the vehicle, it can go relatively quickly. A driver will be expected to present a record of duty status, that's RODS, driver's license, hazmat requirements, medical card and waiver, skill performance evaluation certificate, vehicle inspection report, HMDG requirements, and HOS documentation. Level 4. Special inspections. A Level 4 inspection is a one-time inspection of a specific trend within the industry. This type of inspection happens when the Department of Transportation wants to do further research on industry issues. Level 5. Vehicle-only inspection. A Level 5 inspection is like Level 1, but the driver is not present during the inspection. During this inspection, the examiner will check everything that's in the Level 1 inspection except those relevant to the driver. Level 6. Enhanced NAS inspection for radioactive shipments. The Level 6 inspection is only relevant to drivers that haul radioactive materials. These inspections are put into place to ensure that drivers who haul radioactive material are following proper safety protocol. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hey, this is the Road Hammers. You're listening to TNCRadio.Live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.Live with Shelley Johnson and Tom Kelly. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group. She's been talking about the supply chain situation, which is super complicated. We also have our driver partner, Tom Kirk, with us, who has a lot of questions for Lisa. Tom, I'm going to throw it back to you because you said you had a couple more questions for her.
I think something that ties in well to what we've been talking about, Lisa, is there's been all this talk about just-in-time freight for years, and a lot of times drivers are kind of scratching their heads and, how does this make sense, particularly if there's a weather delay like some of the problems in Texas or the winter storms this year or a global pandemic. Do you see just-in-time freight changing and becoming maybe a different mode or a different standard, or how do you see just-in-time freight developing into the future?
Well, I definitely think that we have become very accustomed to just-in-time freight. However, with the risks that have they've been highlighted in essence during this recession or during this pandemic. I mean, we have seen a lot of folks who are thinking now about how do I position inventory? How do I make sure that I have a strategic stockpile? And how do I move from being just in time to they shouldn't be moving from just in time to just in case, although a lot of them are, but they're moving from just in time to how do I think about this strategically and have inventory that's critical positioned where it really should be, and I can rely upon it. So I think that unfortunately with the level of volatility and the changes going on in the supply chain, they're probably still going to be asking for just-in-time freight because they're going to have a hard time keeping up with changing conditions. But on the other hand, they are going to be looking at strategic placement of inventory and capacity so that they can give you a better picture in the future. And I have one client who's actually doing that. They're creating more of a milk run idea so they can give their transportation partners a better view.
I think that makes a lot of sense because, having hauled some of it myself where, they don't really want it early, but they don't want it late. They want it in a very narrow window, and that can sometimes cause major problems for all involved. I think, whether it's maybe a day or a week of, I don't know if stockpiling or just in case is quite the right term, but at least from a driver's perspective, it makes a little bit more sense. Continuing along that vein, if we look at the future with the potential of recession, a lot of drivers are concerned about that. The truck to load ratio is shifting so that there are fewer extra loads for the trucks. Rates are coming down. Various expenses are going up. So there's a lot of concerns that trucking may be showing an indication of a potential recession coming forwards. What do you think that drivers can be doing, particularly owner-operators, small trucking companies, to keep in mind that, hey, there could be a recession coming. There's all these supply changes coming to potentially be better partners or better positioned to take advantage of business opportunities and be more nimble than maybe some of the larger companies?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. And you mentioned a few of the tips of how you can grow during these times. Because who knows, we have inflationary pressures going on and deflationary pressures. So that's quite the challenging and volatile environment, if you will. So I think if you can be nimble, resilient, and you can remember that service levels are a priority. So if you can be thinking about how do you provide the best service while still making win-win profits, meaning you obviously need to make a profit and you want your customer to make a profit. And really, my clients would appreciate a transportation partner that went to them and said, I have this idea. Why don't, how about let's set up a milk run? Let's, do X, Y, or Z that would allow us to make it more predictable. What, our like what their needs are, and that would better serve their customers, and that would allow them, to make more money and see you more as a value added partner. Because I do think I've been calling them the smarter companies or clients, but basically those that you see are more resilient and innovative themselves. If you make suggestions, and of course you always want to put it in their best interest, but you make suggestions of how you can help them, or maybe getting together to brainstorm how you can help them grow or improve upon their business. They're going to appreciate that. And then they are going to be taking volume from competitors that are not doing these activities. So when they take additional volume, you'll get additional volume. So that's what I think might work.
So I think a good takeaway on that is that a smart small business owner or single truck owner operator thing should always be looking for strengths and weaknesses of their customers, particularly if they go to that warehouse or client on a regular basis, and always be looking at it from a business perspective of how can I provide extra value, and then promote themselves as a solution. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Really, clients take it very well when one of their supply chain partners comes to them and says, I've been thinking about your business and what I see from my point of view. And even that alone is valuable to the clients. But especially if they come with suggestions or ideas to brainstorm further. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I think one thing that drivers a lot of times see is various inefficiencies, at least from the driver's standpoint, of things that are being done on loading docks or other situations, where to us it's a simple solution. Maybe it is that simple, or maybe it's not, but it's just like, why isn't this being done? And maybe it's because the customer doesn't know. And if you speak up, you might get a long-term client or contract out of it and not be relying on the spot market. But a term you've mentioned, Lisa, a couple of times is milk run. Now to me as a driver, when I hear that, a milk run is a very easy run that makes me a lot of money, where I don't have to work real hard. Is right. That what you're referring to? Or are you using maybe a different context than maybe some drivers would?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a really good question. So when I say that, I mean, like, we have, like, I have a client that they have a main manufacturing facility, and then they know that they're going to send on average 2 loads a week to Texas, let's say. And then they know they need to send 5 loads a week to California. And so if they set up like let's just, instead of like figuring this out every week, panicking and always like, trying to get drivers more quickly, they set up a run on Tuesdays and Thursdays to Texas, and they set up a daily run to California, and they make sure that they have like what's needed to go in trucks on those days. So that's what I mean by a milk run. And in my old life, we also would do multiple stop truckloads, and so we would maybe do a milk run with a route. So that's what I meant by milk run.
Oh, okay. Yeah, at least from my perspective, we'd call that a dedicated or semi-dedicated account. But
okay, thank you.
And like I said, but that's one of the challenges sometimes I've discovered, even dealing with regular customers. There's these small misunderstandings in terminology that can develop into problems because nobody takes that extra 10 seconds to go, wait a second, what did you mean by that?
That's a great question. And that's what my client was calling it. So that's why I called it that. So it's interesting. So to your point, who knows if they were on the same page? It's those alignment things again. So having a conversation is a good place to start.
Lisa, I had a quick question, if you don't mind, Tom. Do you see with what's happening in the supply chain and what we saw with the pandemic when it was in full force in 2020, that a lot of the essential goods that we have to have, like prescription medications and we saw the mask shortages and all of that, things that are actually essential, various perishable food, things that we can store. Do you think a lot of this will be done more domestically so that we don't have the chaos factor on a worldwide basis?
I definitely think that that's the trend, that's the direction, because we can't afford to be dependent on other countries with all the conflicts going on in the world for things that are essential like that. So for sure, that is the direction. Now, there's many ways for them to think through that, create a strategic partner, start manufacturing on their own. There's a lot of options. Sure. And probably more from a North America perspective, but leaning towards the U.S. because we have to, there's national security kind of things too. It depends on the topic.
Well, I think I'd like to touch maybe more on that, and I'm sure Tom has some more questions, but we do have to go to break. You're listening to the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.Live. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group. Stay tuned for more coming up.
The info blog on TNCRadio.Live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. A truck driver's guide to balancing work and home life. Truck driving's hard and demanding work. Becoming a truck driver means spending many hours and days on the road. You'll sacrifice a lot for your trucking career. For many long-haul truck drivers, it's hard to separate life at work from life at home. Learning how to have a balance between home life and work life is essential if you want to have a long-lasting career in trucking. Check out our guide to balancing work and home life for truck drivers. Get enough sleep. Getting the recommended amount of sleep each night is a rare thing for truckers. Although sleep may be difficult for truckers because of the uncomfortable way of living, it's essential to their well-being and safety. Start prioritizing sleep and make a sleep schedule. Set an alarm for a certain time and turn off all electronics and get your much-needed sleep. Not enough sleep can make life on the road miserable. Exercise often. Due to the many hours of sitting each day, truckers start to experience body pain and health issues. Not exercising and taking care of your health can cause a lot of problems in the long run. You could be out of a job and possibly out of work. Eat healthy. Having your truck stocked with healthy snacks and meals while you're on the road will help teach you how to have a healthy work-life balance. Start making it a habit to go to the grocery store before you head out on the road. Also, avoid eating at fast food restaurants and truck stops. Do not think about work when you're at home. Whether you love trucking or hate it, you've probably thought about your job while you're off the clock. It can be difficult to separate the two. Thinking about work too much while you're at home can make you anxious, sleep-deprived, and put you in a bad mood. Instead of worrying about work, try picking up a new hobby or exercising. Spending time with friends and family can also get your mind off things. Make time for family. It doesn't matter if you're on the road or at home. Make time for family. Make it a priority to talk to someone in your family once a day. It can be tough for truckers, especially OTR truckers, to maintain relationships with their family due to the trucking lifestyle. Keeping in contact with your loved ones will help life on the road be less lonely. For more information, be sure to check out the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
For the latest in ride-sharing gig economy news, visit uberliftdrivers.com. That's uberliftdrivers.com.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.Live with Shelley Johnson and Tom Kelly. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson, who's president of LMA Consulting Group. We've been talking about the supply chain situation. We've also had our driver partner, Tom Kirk, here with us. Lisa, when we were in our previous segment, you said you do, in fact, see a shift for more domestic production on our essential goods. I would think that would definitely calm a lot of nerves on things that we absolutely need, and there'd be some benefits, and maybe you could stem the tide of some of the hyperinflation and possible recession people have been bantering about. I mean, we're hearing all kinds of things.
Yeah, well, definitely for essential goods, like, for example, pharmaceuticals and, those types of ththings. I think we discovered, we were woken up, if you will, during the pandemic. And, those leaders are definitely looking at strategies to reshore and bring them closer to home. Generally speaking, depends on the product, but in the U.S., possibly Mexico, they realize they have to have more control over something so important. So they're definitely doing that. It is going to then further change the supply chain, because suppliers won't be, you wouldn't want a supplier located halfway around the world if you're going to manufacture it nearby. So from that point of view, it's the good news is that that's definitely happening. It's not necessarily being advertised across the board, because if you advertise that you're moving your supply chain back, you're definitely not going to get priority in your current supply chain. So that's a problem.
True. Yeah.
So that's the tricky part. So things will continue to evolve and be volatile is what I see happening. In terms of inflation and deflation, well, the inflation is really happening for a couple of reasons, because there's like pent up demand for one, which that's still true. And then there's a shortage of supply. So that's driving the price up for products. And unfortunately, the strong will keep getting stronger and the weak will keep getting weaker. Because if you think about it, if you can take better control of your supply chain, your prices will still have to go up, generally speaking, but you'll have more control over it. So you won't have to pay as outrageous of prices, which means you won't have to pass them along, which means you'll probably take more product from the competition, which means things will continue to change. Right. So I think that inflation, because there's the level of supply chain disruption that we have, is bound to continue for the foreseeable future. There's some things you can do to mitigate it. On the other hand, there is concerns about, the recessionary environment, in the sense that will people just start to panic, really, and stop buying because of, all of these issues going on. But currently there's, the market was flooded with money the last few years with during the pandemic. And so really there's still a lot of cash out there. So it's from everything I hear, I think that there is this unfortunate possibility of stagflation down the road, but I think that most people are still thinking that there's more inflationary pressure, and people have money to spend, generally speaking. I mean, with the continued rising gas prices, it's certainly causing concern, however. And so I think people will change the types of things they do and the types of things they buy, which of course will further create chaos, because it will be unpredictable.
Oh, sure.
So anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but I see all those factors playing, coming to fruition. But the good news is that in your particular situation, you can do some things to repair and to avoid, negative consequences, or too many negative consequences.
Sure. It'd be nice if you could put a Band-Aid on it, but that's not the way it works.
You're right.
And certainly the astronomical costs of trucks. I mean, double in a year. Tom, isn't it something that was $50,000, maybe a used truck a year ago? They're double in price. People, if they're in a recession, they're going to be stuck with equipment that's depreciated tremendously, but yet they've got this massive payment.
Shelley, you're conservative. There are trucks that are going for 3 to 4 times what they were going 2 years ago. So there are $50,000 trucks that are going for 130-ish, give or take a little bit. So, you're looking at situations where some of these used trucks, and we're not talking low mileage, we're talking moderate to moderately high mileage trucks, are selling for what would be considered in the range of a new truck price, $150,000 to $200,000, depending on some factors. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, a huge concern for drivers there. Lisa, I have one last question here.
And we have about 5 or 6 minutes at the max, so.
Perfect. Hopefully this is a simple question. Have we ever seen a situation where you had some of these inflationary as well as deflationary or recession-type pressures all dropping at the same time?
Well, I mean, the last time that happened was in the 70s with the stagflation, but the situation is different because, it's the supply chain disruptions are really causing causing a lot of the issues in a way. And so I would say there's never been a time that's just like this, but it's probably most representative of what happened in the 70s in terms of like the potential for stagflation. And so we do know how to handle, it's kind of similar to the supply chain. We know how to handle individual pieces that are happening. So I think it's getting our best minds together, even if we're a boutique trucking company, if you will, and thinking through like how can we best navigate these times, because the successful people are going to be thinking ahead and innovating and are resilient, and they will be successful.
We need to have people like you talking to government too, so that they can learn how to be efficient and fortuitous.
If only they would listen, right?
Yeah. And of course, when you have people changing offices every 4 years, that probably makes it difficult too, So,
that is true.
You never know which direction are we headed now, which way's the wind going to blow.
That's true. I think that's why we have to take control as our supply chain partners and kind of set it up to be resilient based on changing policies from the government. To your point, I mean, to some degree, that's what we need to do to be successful.
Somehow resilient and government, they don't seem to work together well.
No, we have to be resilient because they won't be, but they will change policies.
Right. The people have to be Teflon. It bounces off, right? Oh, my goodness.
That's right.
So, Lisa, where do people reach you? You are a wealth of information.
Well, one of the best ways is with my website, and that's LMA and then hyphen consultinggroup.com. So like Lisa Mary Apple hyphen consultinggroup.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter and, all the main social media type platforms. And generally speaking, it'll be like Lisa Anderson LMA for my personal profile. And of course, LMA Consulting for the business one.
Wonderful. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, Lisa. You've been a wealth of information, and I think you've given everybody a good education and grasp on what the heck's really happening, and you've given us some hope.
Well, great. No, I do think there's definite hope for those that are interested in being ahead of the trends, because if you think about it, there's going to be a lot of downside on the people who are staying stagnant and aren't doing that. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to absorb volume from those who aren't taking the proactive approach.
Proactive is always a good thing. Thank you so much, Lisa. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live. Stay tuned for more coming up. 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 For more coming up.